Shubh Karya they did. That is, they gave us an impetus into global leadership roles. And as GCCs are now moving from being just mere outposts to satellite centers to actually becoming transformation and portfolio hubs, leadership expectations have now expanded far beyond operational excellence. And now GCC leaders must not just be innovators, they should be cultural connectors, talent enablers, etc., etc., etc. Because they're also navigating global local dynamics and fostering high impact ready teams. That's a tall order, and people sitting with me on this panel have done it all, been there, seen that, everything. So in this discussion, we will explore the leadership traits which are essential for success in this changing landscape and for grooming high potential talent, and the unique strengths that India Leadership Pipeline offers. So without further ado, I will begin. Dipu, my first question to you.
Sure.
GCC leaders today, as I said, are expected to wear multifaceted hats. From your experience, what are the most critical leadership traits?
Sure. Let me start out. First of all, thank you to ET and Accenture and all the other partners for hosting us here. Wonderful, wonderful session. It's been, so far, from the start itself, it's been a great list of panelists, a lot of good questions answered. That said, as you know in cricket, the start of the innings is important, but how you finish is much more important. So as the last, group of panelists, it's up to us to finish strong and make this a success. So no pressure.
Yes.
From a traits perspective, it is absolutely important as a GCC head. There are so many hats you wear, right? First of all, you have two main group of constituents you have to make happy, right? You have the global leadership, especially the C-suite level, and then you have the India team, right? Both are tough to basically make happy and satisfied, but you have to work and basically balance both sides, right? On the global side, we are always basically marketing, selling, and being the kind of sharing everything about India, the new India, right? So there is still a lot of, I would say, misconceptions about India from like 10, 15 years ago, and that we got to go and say we are not longer that. It's much more there, right? So that is one of the the critical part. The second side of it with the India team, it's the usual, right? Being there, culture, engagement, spending time, and basically being available, so that people can come do, whether it is mentorship or if they have questions, being open, right? That sense of transparency. So it's really, really important, all of that above.
Thank you, Dipu. Thank you so much. And no pressure, as you said. Okay. I now see what is the most critical leadership trait. Just say no pressure and everyone will deliver. Thank you. Snigdha, same question to you. What do you think are the most critical leadership traits?
So, according to me, I think we've had like
Mike.
a pretty long stint in GCC. I think as an industry, we are 40 years old. And so it's time to change the game, right? And so it's at this juncture, what I think is extremely critical for not just growth, but even sustenance are, a bunch of skills. One, of course, Dipu, of course, covered quite a bit of it. But I think tech, yes, we are known as a tech powerhouse in India. So tech, whether it's, cloud, it's any of these AI, automation, cloud, blockchain, yes, all the tech trends. But it's also all of the automation that's going to bring us the operational efficiencies, right? So that, I think, is a basic 101. Second, the domain, because technology is not the end goal. I think either delivering to a new business opportunity or solving a business problem is important. And therefore, for leadership, especially as you grow more senior, and of course, necessarily at the junior levels too, is understanding the domain, understanding the industry, understanding the market. Some industries are more regulated, so then I think it's also about understanding the Data Act, the Data Privacy Acts, regulations, and so on and so forth. Third, I think it's important for the leaders to be very strategic and visionary, not solve problems for today, but be more equipped to solve problems of tomorrow, which really means is what they need to do is how can their teams or organizations have access to information, right? Have access to data so that they can interpret the data, interpret the insights, and actionize on it. So here, customer intelligence, right? Market intelligence. And customer intelligence can be through customer advisory boards, roadmap meetings, so on and so forth. but it can also be a lot of the support data that you glean and figure out intelligence. So how do you ensure that you're enabling the teams for growth? I think that is one very big aspect. How do you get intelligence to them? How do you create the environment such that they can do quick prototyping, stuff like that, right, and launch things? I think so. As a leader, I feel these today are the 101, right? It's no more tech. Now, what is required for a leader is therefore a lot of adaptability, alignment to headquarters, influencing skills, articulation skills. I think those are the ones that we in our education system in the academia do not emphasize much upon. And therefore, the industry needs to fill those gaps, working with the academia, working with startups, working with industry bodies. So I think those are things that I feel today have to be the focus, and I just feel that 101 bar has just shifted right above.
So that's a tall order and a good checklist to have as well. And you also bring in all the stakeholders within the ecosystem. So that's not just your job, everyone is contributing. Right. Takes a village, absolutely. So, of course, the very thesis of GCC is that there is a local reality and that there is a global expectation. Sunil, my question to you, how do you bridge this gap between global headquarters and local teams, and how do you navigate or manage the cultural differences?
So speaking of cultural differences, right? See, first of all, the good news is, GCCs have been here for a long time. So the whole gap between the cultural difference between here and, take it US or Europe, it has been reducing, but it still exists, right? I mean, there are a lot of cultural gaps. Based on my personal experience, the ones I sort of, have spent long time dealing with these is, the first one is ownership, right? When you look at, for example, companies in US, when you look at the working style in US, people tend to take ownership, much more proactively than what we have seen in India, right? So let's say moment an initiative is decided, you explicitly don't have to go and tell people you take ownership of this, right? Culturally, that's a little bit of a gap here, and it's not that our people don't want to take ownership. It's because sometimes they wait to say, someone has to call out explicitly saying, okay, you need to take ownership of this, right? So that's one gap. Now, how I have bridged this is try to bridge this rather is one is try to build single-threaded teams as much as possible. What I mean by that is let's say if you have a specific domain team, like 3 or 4 domain teams, build one team there, one team here, where the front-to-back model exists in India, so that people don't feel that they're going to step on someone else's toes when they take the ownership, right? So that's one way of doing this. The second cultural difference I've also seen, typically this happens typically with GCCs, is the reporting structure, right? See, people in the US, they have a very straight line reporting into their bosses and so on and so forth. Versus India, because of the GCC model, invariably there is some kind of a matrix reporting that comes into play, where you have a local boss, you have a functional owner, and so that sometimes confuses people as compared to how you would have seen typically in US, right? And this is a question of maturity. So folks who have worked in these kind of models, like matrix reporting organizations, they know how to deal with it. The junior people who come in, they sometimes get confused. It's like, I don't know whether I'm accountable more to my local guy or to the functional guy who's sitting globally, right? So that's a confusion, but it's a matter of education, and as we mature more, I think that's a model that's getting better. And the third thing I'll also quickly talk about from a cultural difference is, I mean, it's a very hot topic nowadays, whole work-life balance, right? I mean, especially if you're in the East Coast in the US, pretty much your evenings are to yourself. You don't have to take calls and all. Versus if you are in the West Coast, then probably there's a little bit of morning and evening overlap. But in India, invariably, most of us have to take these late night calls, no matter whether you're working East Coast or West Coast. So that's one cultural difference that exists between India and US, where their definition of work-life balance is very different than what our definition of work-life balance is. But as leaders, we need to be cognizant about that. One of the things, like some of the things I have done is, the fact that we use Slack and all those things, We try to do a lot of asynchronous communication so that everyone doesn't have to be in the evening meetings. Only one or two stakeholders can be there, whereas all the updates have already come into the channel from an asynchronous fashion and stuff like that. So those are the three things what I would like to call out, from a culture building standpoint.
Noted. One more thing, Janoo, and my question is to you. One more thing that we've always seen is a leadership, when someone is touted as a leader, they're placed in diverse projects and that accelerates their growth to leadership. Can you share an example of how you have seen that exposure to different teams or geographies have actually accelerated their leadership ability or placed them in that position faster? To you, yes.
Sure. I think leadership isn't built in silos, When high potential talent is given the right exposure, is pushed to adapt and pushed to learn new things, global leadership is built, I categorically remember placing a back-end engineer in a global SaaS company. He started working with just on one product line, and the leadership there saw talent in him and pushed him to work on a very critical AI analytics product, which was way out of his comfort zone. Did very well there, and he was given an opportunity to manage a European customer. He was basically left no choice but to learn the European security and compliance nuances, And today when I look back at his journey in 5 years, when he is leading the entire product function for that company, I'm not surprised. That's how leadership is built, You give them right exposure, you push them to adapt, and you ensure that they are at the right place, learning the new things. And that's how I think true blue leaders are built, So I think it's invariably very important that we give the right exposure to high potential talent. We ensure that we are giving them autonomy to perform.
Yes.
So those are some things I think kind of really shape up, leadership.
Thank you for giving that example. That really strengthens the point. Now, one more thing about India market is there's quite a unique experience to be offered. A lot of global companies, and you might support this statement or you might state from experience, a lot of global companies ensure that whoever is being touted as a leader actually has a stint in India because of the diversity we offer. And that means if you worked in India, you can work anywhere in the world. Uma, my question to you is, so what exactly is this unique diversity trait that we have that shapes global leaders?
Yeah, sure. In fact, just last week I was speaking to a GCC head in India. They have 5 centers across 5 cities in the country. And he was saying that the very working styles, mindsets, skills, etc., is so different across each of these cities that when you work with, some of these centers across the country, you start to lead people with so much diversity that even at a global platform, it prepares you for the kind of diversity that you encounter across cultures. Secondly, given that India is a really high growth economy in the past couple of decades, but there are still resource constraints, right, across multiple areas. So people who worked in India learn how to creatively solve problems, hustle in a very positive sense. So people learn how to hustle, find solutions and get things done. So that kind of mindset and creative thinking process actually helps when you're operating at a global level. And finally, for those who've grown up in our Indian society, we've all grown up in really connected, multicultural, relationship-driven environments. So our interpersonal skills, our ability to empathize, our emotional intelligence is actually at a very high level, which helps when you're working in a global context across different, diverse sets of people. Yeah.
Perfect. So those are unique strengths. I always had faith in our Jugaad system. Yeah. Correct. So Snigdha, my question to you then. What specific strategies do you use to build a talented and also well-balanced team? Because now GCCs are also taking up high strategic projects, and that's where your leadership will also be judged. Right? So what do you do to build a team like that?
So one, I think, at a very high level, what I really look forward to is a talent that really loves getting comfortable, being uncomfortable, or pushing themselves to an uncomfortable zone. So I believe that the attitude or the mindset is the most important thing, like we just heard about ownership and accountability. Sometimes I hear from my peers about the entitlement culture in the new generation and all of that. But I feel those are all like various symptoms because of different exposures to culture, and everybody comes from a different background. I feel fundamentally, if you're able to help people love learning, right, then that becomes your dopamine kick, right? Then what happens is wherever you throw them, they will just go pick it up because they look out for those challenges, they look out for those uncomfortable zones. And so I think, again, I usually believe that a lot of the cultural aspects are top-down, right? So helping your senior leaders understand the value of nurturing talent, creating these experiences, global experience, sending them to customer locations, asking them to work with cross-functional teams. Doing the rotations, I think, is important. So, how do you value people? How do you create succession plans? I think that aspect of nurturing talent or the talent strategy itself is one very, very critical program that we put together to just have senior leaders understand it. And then, just trickles down, right? Because a lot of the talent look at what the leadership is doing. Second, of course, like I talked about, the entrepreneurial mindset or adaptability, resilience. A lot of people will look at adverse situations and, start playing the victim card. I think, how do you create this culture where people feel that the more adverse, challenging situations you go through, you are just better equipped to handle it, right? Handle the situation, handle yourself, and frame up your personality. And then, of course, the final thing is, of course, understanding your market domain. So I feel nurturing your talent, honing your talent, pushing them, nudging them, finding out what was that dopamine kick for each of them and helping that, helping build that culture is important. Second, as we see a new advent of technology adoption, it becomes very important to find out where do we source this tech expertise from. This could be from another industry, it could be from another company, or we work together with academia, industry, and start building that talent. So again, a lot of the ecosystem players, what we definitely do is we try to come together, figure out what the skill sets, have a lot of learning and collaboration across the industry itself. Personally, I think there are, a bunch of things. One,
one of our sales leaders is very data driven. Like he cannot do without data. And the other person is a storyteller because we're selling services, right? But put them in the right environment and they're fire, And I think when you're doing mass recruitment, it can be challenging, but I think if something like this is very clear at the leadership level and hiring managers are very cognizant that we got to have 5 different sets of Java developers with different mindsets, with different approaches, then I think it's like a killer combination, Having said that, right environment is very important. Right temperament, right, growth opportunities is very important. Personally, this formula has really worked for me, and I think if we just do mindful recruitment, it can really change a lot of things for GCCs or startups as well, So, yeah.
So basically, a leader's vision board should be very clear as to what kind of different mindsets need to be, where are the gaps and how do I fix it. Not just about acquiring talent, but also retaining them, which is a bigger challenge, of course. Yes. So, all right, let me flip this question a little bit. Now, not just about team, but also succession planning. Sunil, let me come to you. Spotting future leaders is also a part of our project, right? Because we have to ensure business continuity or succession. How do you identify and nurture high potential leadership talent?
So basically, when you look across your organization, you'll always find people who have certain traits, right? For example, consistent performers, they have a bias towards action, they are strategic thinkers, they like mentoring people. So these people, you can easily spot them and they'll sort of stand out on the crowd. So the first job is to, of course, identify these people and then slowly start pushing them to do multiple things. One is, as Vaishnavi was saying before, put them into a little bit of a, uncharted territory, see how they do. put them some stretch goals and all those things, and obviously these guys will end up doing good, right? So the next step, the key step is to how do you build mentorship programs around these people so that they feel that yes, they are being trained around this one, right? So when you do all these things, see, I've also seen that some people, while they have these traits, they just don't want to get into leadership roles yet, right? They still want to be more technical and all. So that's where the coaching and mentoring from GCC leadership, like all of you guys, comes in. But while you are doing this, as Vaishnavi rightly said, what's also important is the succession planning. And the big firms generally in GCC have mastered the art of succession planning. Unfortunately, the smaller ones are not there yet because we don't feel that's necessary yet. But the bigger ones always have an amazing sort of a structure. How do you do succession planning and all? One of the things I have seen personally where succession planning really works well, you actually involve the person for whom you're doing the succession planning. He or she is the best person to tell you what his or her replacement will look like for as you go ahead, right? So those are the things, pretty much to summarize, identifying, nurturing, mentoring, and building a succession plan so that the person who is being trained as a leader sees himself or herself, making himself sort of indispensable so that he or she goes up and more people come and take the person's role.
Thank you. Same question.
There's this interesting data point I came across recently. It says leadership is the single biggest predictor of an organization's success, yet globally only 11% of the organizations feel that they have a strong leadership bench. So there is so much of a requirement in terms of talent development. But through our company, The Star in Me, we work with several Fortune 500 firms and GCCs on talent development. So what we're seeing is huge investment of time and effort in developing the next pipeline of leaders. And two very interesting insights that we've observed in the past few years. The first one is, we typically in GCCs, we see things that are done at headquarters and then get cascaded down to the GCC level. But what we are seeing nowadays, especially in terms of talent development, is GCC is taking the initiative to design unique talent development initiatives, which once successful are getting cascaded to the rest of their other GCC centers across the world and to the headquarters. So we run a program in India, it's successful, and we end up running it across 20 countries. So that is an interesting trend that's emerging. Secondly, the other thing is what people have realized is while you look at bringing in industry experts to teach you certain concepts, there is a unique blend of industry expertise plus academic insight, which can actually help you better in terms of your talent development initiatives. So there is a lot of involvement in terms of taking your talent to business schools, some of the best premier business schools in India and abroad, and that is bringing in a unique edge in terms of talent development. So talent development in GCCs we are seeing is a huge priority and will continue to be so.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Uma. Question to you.
Sure.
Now, what is the common denominator that you see in the pipeline that ascends to global leadership? Is there a particular trait? Is there a particular background? What is it?
So let me start by what is not part of it, right? It is definitely not the 80-hour work week. It is definitely not about staring or not staring at your wife, boyfriend, girlfriend on Sundays, right? It has nothing to do with any of that. What is very, very important is self-confidence. Now, when I say self-confidence, you think it's very obvious, right? One of the biggest differences between GCCs and India in general in the service industry, right? In GCCs, we are all employees. We are basically employees of the mothership. And when we look at, basically job titles, roles, expectations, an employee in India is judged equally with an employee. For us, it's in Ireland, it's in US, basically, right? They're all judged, equally. So if you are a leader, you need to have absolute self-belief in your skills, that you are in a meeting with a leadership. It doesn't matter where they are, how skilled they are. You have what it takes to be there, right? So you need to develop that. And that's easier said than done, but that's something that is absolutely needed, right? That's one part of it. The second one, I think, both Sunil and Snigdha did mention to it. It's the ability to kind of jump in, to some vague requirements. It might not be fully defined. It might look like it might not be the right, next step to take for your career. But good leadership, people who are always growing, always jumps in, right? Let me jump in, let me figure out. It may or may not. They are not afraid to, basically, risk it, right? And for us, from a leadership perspective, we will be there to support. Jump in, help out. If they go wrong, we are there to support, right? It is much more tougher with people who are like, I don't like it. I am Java. I am not going to look at this. I am this. I'm not that. I won't look at Scrum Master, right? All those things, when they say no, it's going to be a challenge, right? Basically, in that regard. So those are two skills we are almost always seeing. The other one is you always have to be continuously learning, up to date, right? I mean, we talk about AI and how things are going to be changing, how to adapt. That willingness to adapt, jump in, be ready, whatever it may be, I will kind of work around it and learn from it and kind of, be ready for it, right? That needs to be there as well, at least from my side.
Okay, thank you so much. Now I'll do a quick lightning round, and these are my favorite questions. I have to warn you. So feel free to offer contrarian views as well. We accept all sorts of answers, but they come with terms and conditions. Okay. I know technology is an enabler. I know technology is omnipresent, etc., etc., etc. Are we over-indexing on technical skills, placing too much emphasis? If yes, then what are the soft skills we actually need to place an emphasis on? We will begin with Uma. We'll go Uma, Sunil, Janoo, Dipu, and Snigdha.
So while it is extremely important to focus on technical skills, eventually there will come a time when technical skills are easily accessible across organizations. Everyone has the same information. So what will become a true competitive differentiator in future is the soft skills, things like creativity, innovation, emotional intelligence, ability to solve problems. So I think equal emphasis should be placed on technical as well as soft skills.
Yeah, I mean, my views are very similar to Uma. Right, see, technology is getting a little bit more sort of level field. Where leaders will stand out is besides technology, how well do they understand the business? How well do they understand the functional domain, right? So that's what will sort of take them to the next level. Besides having the soft skills and all those things, I think it's very important to have the business acumen as well as the functional know-how.
I think gone are the days where you want somebody who has done one sort of thing for a decade. I think that's just very dated. I get very excited when I look at somebody who has solved varied problems, has picked up very different assignments. Now that to me, of course, the outcome of those assignments I factor, right? What happened to those projects, what happened to those opportunities. But the fact that the person had in them to kind of pick up something out of their comfort zone couple of times is a reflection of their learning ability as well, right? So I think technology can be learned, but our values and principles kind of live with us. So I think it's very important that we pay a lot of attention to value-driven, principle-driven hiring, right? Otherwise, I think success kind of will fade out very easily, especially in global setups.
Yep. All right, so I'm going to agree with Sunil as well. I mean, soft skills are important, networking is important, making that connection relationship with global is very important. However, what I feel that is lacking right now in India is the functional and the industry knowledge, right? We have great developers, we have great technology, but even when they're developing, they really have no clue exactly what that functionality is going to be used in. Who is the end user? What is the client going to be using? If you're developing a dashboard, if you really understand what that dashboard is going to be used for by the client and what way, will make your product a lot better, right? You already will be, kind of thinking in that angle. You'll be building in your, initial flow itself, basically foolproof methodologies and kind of stuff to kind of, cover up some of the things as well, right? So that is very important. That is something that we are lacking. We need more product managers. We need more, product owners. We need industry knowledge that, in the skills that you are, working on, basically.
So I think what I believe is required is 2 or 3 traits, right? One is adaptability. I think every organization is going through its highs, lows, lot of leadership changes, lot of changes in the way the leaders operate. So adaptability, to figure out how to work in a complex hierarchy, matrix, and then align and yet deliver the outcome. So I think that's important. Risk-taking and resilience, I think, go hand in hand. If you want to be able to take the big bets, you have to have the ability to be resilient, because some of them are going to work, some of them are not going to work. Do you have that thick skin to say, okay, that was a failure, but that shouldn't stop me from going again, right? So I think those two really define success or failure of a leader, right? Because if you have those two in your pocket, I think you can go a long way.
Noted. You have to come back the same way. Just stay with me here. Quick question. I need a quick answer. What is one pitfall or trap that you have to avoid as a global leader? Many people are blindsided.
I think the day a leader stops learning and thinking, I'm done, I think, I've reached this pinnacle of my career. I think that's where the downfall starts. So,
From a GCC perspective,
Yeah.
over-promising, under-delivering, not really, kind of telling the truth. And whenever you cannot do something, you should be open about it, right? Deliver the bad news early. Don't wait for it.
Rip the bandit off. Yeah. Janoo?
I think taking a lot of decisions, keeping the HQ in mind, and not being cognizant of the regional setup and mindset. I think that's very important. I think as a GCC leader, even though I'm not one, but I think it's very important that we educate our global stakeholders on how India thinks, how we are as a society, right? I think making most of your decisions which are aligned to HQ at times can be a big problem
So local
and a
reality.
pitfall.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Perfect.
So one trap I try to avoid as a GCC leader is us versus them. See,
Okay.
it's never India versus US. This is India team, that is US team, or they are doing this because we are in India. That's the tone I always want to kill. And I try to sort of stay away from that rhetoric. So that's the pitfall I generally try to avoid.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Ma'am?
Operating in silos, I think, is one of those things. Recognize that you're part of a larger company that is global. So as long as you feel part of that overall company, I think it makes a lot more sense.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for your insights. It was great having you here and we learned the nuances of being a good leader. And we hope this takes us to more contribution to GDP and truly dominating the world space. Thank you so much. You've been a lovely audience.